couple of minutes. I know Superintendent Kelly's going to be arriving a few minutes late, and we're going to be pretty close to a quorum.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, Nicholas.
We only need one more to have our 7. Getting close.
We got there.
We got there. Welcome, Dr. Kelly. You're officially the number 7.
Oh, how are you?
We're all great now that you're here.
And I actually think, Superintendent Kelly, if you wouldn't mind probably opening the meeting, I think, because I do not believe we'll have the mayor or Susan.
Correct.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here for the June 17th meeting of the Revere High School Building Committee. We'd like to call this meeting to order with a roll call.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. And I'll take over from here. See Michael Picardi.
Here.
And we have Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Carl Svensson, just in time.
Here.
Excellent. And Dr. Perella
Here.
and Jennifer Hayes.
Here.
And I don't see Rich Biscay. So I'm going to mark him as absent. And Don Ciaramella, I don't see either. So I'm going to mark him as absent. And Nick Rystrom
Here.
and Jerry Visconti
Here.
and Patrick Keefe.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We will jump right into it with the motion to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting, which was on June 3rd, 2021.
So moved.
And that was a motion by Dr. Kelly.
Second.
Is that Mike Picardi? Sorry. All right, we'll put you down as second that motion. And we will do a roll call again then for approval of the meeting minutes. Mr. Picardi.
Yes.
And Dr. Kelly.
Yes.
And Carl Svensson.
Yes.
And Dr. Perella.
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes.
Yes.
Nick Nystrom,
Yes.
Gary Visconti,
Yes.
and Patrick Keith.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We will continue on then to vote to approve the May invoices for the feasibility study for the Revere High School. So attached to the email that went out this morning was professional services for left field for the amount of $21,000 and Perkins Eastman in the amount of $126,630. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review them or if I should flash them up on the screen, but typically people can't read them on my wide screen, but happy to do so. If not, if nobody has any questions, we can have a motion to approve those invoices.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Carl.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who was that? Jerry. Thank you. Hard to keep up with the squares sometimes. All right, so we will do yet another roll call to vote on these. Mr. Picardi?
Yes.
And Dr. Kelly?
Yes.
Carl Svensson?
Yes.
Dr. Perella?
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes?
Yes.
Nick Nystrom?
Yes.
Jerry Visconti?
Yes.
Thank you. And Patrick Keith?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I am going to turn it over to Brian and the Perkins Eastman team to run through today's presentation.
Thank you, Linda. Can you give me screen permissions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Just get this running. So we've already buzzed through the minutes and invoices. Dan from Perkins Eastman is going to give you a quick update on a utility analysis their team performed, and then we're going to run through the options with costs and schedules. And just as a reminder, we're not scoring anything tonight. That's the last roll call you'll have to do other than adjournment. But Dan, you want to take it over for a minute here?
Sure thing. So one of the things we do for every one of the buildings that we look at is take a look at all the utility bills for the past year, and we actually went back pre-pandemic for this building and try and develop what is known as the EUI, or energy use intensity, which is the amount of energy used per square foot of the building. And it kind of creates a benchmarking relationship between this building, a new building, and average buildings that we can use to see how this building is doing as far as its overall energy use, and how that would stack up against schools across the country, and how it would stack up against potentially a new construction. One of the things to take away from it is to kind of think about what we all feel the energy goals for a new facility might be, and what it looks like versus the building that you're in right now. So you want to go to the next one? That was a monthly EUI. Sorry about that. But this kind of gives you the full picture here. So the existing EUI of the building is around 75. An average school building in the US is around 55. A code MSBA minimum requirement is to hit 37 EUI. And we generally see our buildings in the 20 to high 20s to low 30s. So 28 to 32 is what we're seeing. So this building doesn't perform, it's not the worst performer, but it is on the higher end of where you would. And they show all the schools in Massachusetts they've done, The 75 is on the high end, and there are ones that are 90 and 100 or more out there, but that's kind of how this building stacks up right now. So we would be shooting for an EUI target of less than 30 at the end of the day. That means that basically the energy that this building uses 2 months, the new building would use in a year. Next slide. I think there's one more, right?
Yep, sorry about that.
That's all right. So this just is another version of how it stacks up, showing the existing EUI versus the median and on our target where we would be. Just a different view of the same information as the one before. So I see that they're pointing out that this building uses about 35% more energy than a median school and twice the energy that would be used by the MSBA's requirements right now for minimum energy performance.
Dan, can you talk a little bit about the bar here that is labeled MSBA 2% additional reimbursement? Or add reimbursement?
Yep. So the MSBA has a minimum requirement target. The next piece to that is the LEED Silver requirement, or the LEED Silver target, which gives you a little bit additional reimbursement. And I would say, 100% of our clients go after that reimbursement. Yep. I have never seen anyone. I have never had anyone turn that down.
And we've built pursuing that additional reimbursement into the cost info.
Okay. And is the 2% an additional reimbursement overall on the whole project?
Same rules of engagement apply. It's just a 2% increase to the base reimbursement level, but the rules that sort of mean the total project budget never is entirely reimbursable still apply. It pushes up the base reimbursement rate.
Great, thank you.
Hey Dan, do you happen to have what this translates into dollars? Like what was our annual, and then could we easily project out then we would be paying half of that going forward? Does it track 1-to-1 like that to a degree?
I don't have that, but I could do that.
Okay.
But that can be done. I can do that for the next meeting if everyone's interested in seeing that.
Well, and I'm
We had a little plug in for maintenance of the building on an annual level going forward for options that maintain the high school. It's upwards of $300,000, but I think maybe if we try to merge some of this data into dollars, that'll be a good final update for next week.
We can certainly do it.
Great. Anyone else have any questions on this info? If not, I am going to move into the final options for PDP here. And just real quick, I have all of my video of all of you minimized so I can see more of the screen. So certainly yell out, interrupt if you have questions as we go. And I also just wanted to thank the Perkins Eastman team and fellow left fielders for helping bring a lot of this info together. I'm probably going to be the one babbling the most here, but it's certainly been a team effort. So I'm going to quickly go through each option individually, sort of in a bubble, and we don't really need to spend much time on these pages. You've seen these. What you haven't seen in detail is the schedule pages and some cost breakouts. So we'll run through each of these fairly quickly. Definitely stop me if you have questions. Towards the end are a few summary slides that show both the schedules all on one screen and the budgets all on one screen. Those might be a little bit easier to talk to, but the first one we'll touch upon here is option BR, the code upgrade of the existing high school. And I wanted to just sort of introduce the left side of these schedules. All this stuff up in the upper left is pretty much going to stay the same through the options in terms of our track through the PDP into the PSR, how long schematic design will take. Keep in mind that we will advance a handful of these options for more study in the coming months. And by this fall, we'll be looking at selecting one of those options, submitting it to the state, going through schematic design on that single option, and then sending that single option for approval, for funding. So all of these schedules pretty much are the same on 21, 22, and into 2023. Into 2023 is when, depending on what we're doing, the schedules start to vary. But we see design development and construction documents for the preferred option that's going to be selected this fall happening throughout 2023. And that's the time frame, certainly if we were talking about a code upgrade and a big renovation, that we would get a construction management team on board. That's a process we'll present a little more during the PSR, and we'll ultimately have the committee make the decision on whether to go CMR. We think it's a slam dunk CMR project, and we'll certainly present that to you, but all of the options from a schedule perspective and a cost perspective are structured based on going Chapter 149A, construction management at risk. And that
Brian.
really involves, yep.
Sorry. Can I remind you to tell us what things like CMR stand for?
Sure. Exactly, yeah. No problem. Tons of acronyms here. And there's a million of them just in this contractor business. So the state has really two ways to procure buildings of this size. Chapter 149, which is a traditional design it, finish designing it, bid it, then build it. Very linear process. It's what all of the other schools in Revere have been built. Chapter 149A of Mass General Law is called CM at risk, which CMR is what a lot of folks call it. It's a qualifications-based process where we would advertise for and interview construction management firms based on their qualifications. You can see that we'd still be in design when we did this. We would get them on board with the Inspector General approval. We would go through pre-qualification and selection based on their other project experiences, their financial health, their availability, et cetera. And they would then begin doing the estimates and drawing reviews alongside us, the OPM. So it's a process that gets the contractor involved during design. So we can usually use that to our advantage and get early packages released. It's also usually in the public construction, just a much better process in that we're picking the contractor based on their team, their personnel, and their experience, not just on a low bid number. We wouldn't be bidding until we've already gone through pre-qual and pre-construction with them. So I'll try to keep the acronyms to a minimum, but that applies to all the schedules. On this schedule,
Brian,
yep.
could you just speak to some of the language around the word risks? As far as, I mean, I understand it somewhat, but does that come into any of the set costs or change orders or anything like that? What is the word risk? How does that play into that topic?
So how it's meant here is really the items that are at risk that we've made assumptions here. It's more the risk here, in noting that it's a phased occupied reno, ongoing disruption to on-site activities and elongated construction, really just reference that a reno and sort of Pac-manning our way around that building for 40 months is an inherently riskier proposition, both meaning that there's less that we're going to know until we start pulling parts of that building off. Could affect costs, could affect change orders, could affect schedule. We think we're covering that by calling this a 40-month construction duration. All the new construction you'll see are 30-month durations. So what I mean by risk when I'm noting it on these slides is really stuff that could pan out different than we're assuming it right now. And how you see it on the screen is how we assume it right now, and that's what's driving the pricing. But it would translate, Carl, into if we are going to renovate this building and bring it up to code, we would have probably slightly larger contingencies. We've carried slightly larger contingencies because we think more unanticipated events would occur as compared to new construction.
Right. So at some point, we're going to have to make a decision on that. Is that correct? Whether we go forward with the CM at risk or the alternative?
Yes, that's a decision that we'll go into detail on during the PSR. Since it impacts our ability to start early package construction. You don't see that on this option. And because it really gets us in the ground quicker, that plus the complexity of this job and the size of this job, we think makes it a 149 CMR job. That's why we've structured the assumptions this way. But it is going to be a committee decision that we then will have to put in an application to the Inspector General to get approval to go forward with the CMR process, as opposed to design it, bid it, build it.
Okay, one other question is there any research on other cities and towns who have done comparable projects who have gone one way or the other with they see them at risk? I think we're going to need to do some educating as far as what the risks are on both sides of our decision, and maybe some towns or cities who have built schools who have gone one way or the other and maybe face some adversary or seen some gains for going one way or the other. I think we're going to need some explanation and some clarity on that.
Definitely.
The problem with this school is going to be that you're not going to find very many general contractors that can actually do work at the cost of this school, or that can get bonded at the cost of the school.
And that is, even the details of the pricing would work out a little differently, and we'd handle contingencies and schedules differently. Carl, that's something that we'll present and sort of go into detail on, because I mean there are pricing differences. We would be paying for pre-construction. There would be no pre-construction if we were to just bid the set of drawings, but there's benefits, there's drawbacks. We will definitely present them all, and the committee will ultimately have to make a decision back here in the PSR schematic phase later this year into early next year.
Right. It just seems like the size of this project, as much as it's a decision to be made, it's almost a no-brainer. But I think that it should be spelled out clearly so that nobody's kind of scratching their head on what their decision is on. I mean, to Lynn, it's perfectly clear. I'm pretty clear on it, but I think there's, a lot of people who are going to have to make this decision, and I think that word risk almost throws some risk into the decision, because it's almost a scary word more so than something that would be advantageous to hear. So I think it needs to just be clear on that. That's most likely the best option.
Yep, I understand.
Carl, this is Jim. We will absolutely make a presentation when it comes to that time, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of both approaches, and we could talk about other projects, to your point, and do some benchmarking. So we'll absolutely do that at the right time.
Great, thank you.
Also, if I could add, I believe the risk in the term CM at risk is more for the construction contractor is taking the risk. It's not for the city. It's more that the contractor has the risk of taking this project. So the risk isn't really falling on us. Clarify.
Yep, and that can get lost in all these acronyms. That the word risk being built into CM at risk, in that sense, it absolutely does. The risk is on the general contractor. So that word gets thrown around a lot, and it's good for us to be clear on how it's being used.
Yeah.
So on this schedule, we would look to get all the trade pre-qualification done leading into a winter, spring 2024 bid the whole project. As I noted, I'm forward too quick. As I noted, we're counting it as a 40-month duration. The reason you see a number of these little icons here is this would mean it's certain parts are done at certain times, and we'd be doing a little hopscotch around the site. We think it could get done by summer 2027, which would then we'd have to wait 10 months to just do the MSBA audit, but occupancy for these for this option is in summer 2027. Project would be complete the following fall after we complete the 10-month post-occupancy commissioning review and the audit. In terms of costs, again, when we get to the big spreadsheet, I'm going to reiterate that these are comparative costs. These are not budgets. The reason they're not budgets is they're all based on an assumption of exactly how big the school's going to be. That might evolve. There's also a number of other assumptions based in here, being that we're just working with ideas and test fits at this time. The options that get advanced into further study will start getting more and more specific designs, and we'll start moving towards direct estimating of actual designs. Right now, we're comparing numbers on this base code upgrade option, just to introduce what you're going to see slide by slide here. There is no cost to obtain. There's no eminent domain, etc. The site costs are projected at around 15.5 million. The direct construction cost, the cost of the box, the building, 102 million. Contingencies and markups, which is a whole detailed piece on the big spreadsheet that we could go into detail on if anyone wants to. These are all fired by percentages of the cost. So these markups and contingencies vary based on their percent to this number. Soft costs will always include the professional services for the job, both the design team with Perkins Eastman, left field is the OPM, and various sub-consultants doing all sorts of tasks to support the project. This option just nets out to a total project budget of 181.6 million as an estimate. And our estimating of the MSBA grant puts that around 76 million, a cost to Revere of 104 million. We're going to be running a sort of a simulation on what this cost to Revere would break out to be as far as potential tax impact. That needs a little bit more work. We think we can get there for next week. And as you see at the bottom of this screen, we're just adding a few things here that what I noted earlier. There is some cost to keep the existing building running, just as sort of a side note. And some of these options is where we're going to carry replacement housing costs completely outside of this budget. So again, I'm using the word risks here, and really the same risks apply to the budget as they do schedule. It is a phased occupied reno. It's riskier than new construction, and that usually translates into slightly higher percentages for things like change order contingencies and whatnot. So I'm gonna keep moving unless anyone has any specific questions. I think I'd prefer to explain this effective reimbursement rate a slide or two later, because it's a little bit different on this building code upgrade option, but we will get there. So the add reno option is 1A. You've seen this before. The schedule is for this is exactly the same as what you saw for a reno. And what I'd add is that for this 40-month duration, we think any site work that would come along with this building, including rehabbing Aracola Park, would be able to happen by phase and over this period. So you'll start seeing some of the other schedules as we click forward have more phases out here after construction that might do with demo of the existing building. It might be related to site work, but 40-month construction, same occupancy time as the code upgrade. Summer 2027, same project completion, fall the year after. The costs for 1A really start getting, this is the code upgrade, and why I just mentioned that quickly is its own unique option. All the rest of these options are either an add reno or all new. This is the only add reno being carried. So on the existing site, still no cost to obtain. Site costs, 20 million. Direct costs, 202 million. You'll see that's where the big jump is from the reno into the direct cost for these buildings, is building the new building. That higher cost value ripples into the markups and the contingencies, which are at 106 million here. Soft costs for this option just shy of 58 million, puts this option at 367 million, with a projected possible maximum MSBA grant of 161 million. So I wanted to just talk about that for a second based on this option. So Revere's reimbursement rate being up in the middle high 70s, I think with the bonus points that we talked about earlier that we carried, I believe, Lynn, sorry to put you on the spot, I think 77 is what we had in the 3011 budgets, or 76%.
79, we were getting 2 additional points for sustainability and 1 for, I just carried 1 point for maintenance. Now it's likely to be a fraction higher than that, but that's a good benchmark.
Thank you. So it's easy on these projects, and we have talked about it before, to just take that 79% or whatever it ends up being right up around there and apply it to the total project budget. It's not the way the MSBA system works, however. There's a number of categories that we've presented in the last few months that are categorically ineligible. they're kind of peanuts in the grand scheme of things, like legal costs. What really drives down the effective reimbursement percentage is ineligible square footage, and we're not going to know what's eligible and ineligible for the items for the 30, 40,000 above the MSBA template that we're asking for. We're not going to know for sure what part of that's going to be eligible or not eligible until we submit this package and begin the dialogue with MSBA. So square footage is one driver of it. We've assumed that all of the square footage that we're carrying in the space summary that could be eligible is eligible in these numbers. So some of that space could be deemed ineligible. Doesn't mean you can't build it, with the exception of a bigger gym or a bigger auditorium than we're carrying. Any of these spaces can be built. They're allowable to be built. They'll just be, that portion of the building will be prorated, and Revere will have to pay 100% of the cost with no reimbursement on it. So the other major drive, go ahead, Lynn.
I was just going to say, in these numbers, we did include the things that were categorically ineligible, which was the larger square footage for the auditorium, the larger square footage in the gymnasium and health and wellness section, and the district offices. We took those out as ineligible square footages on the 3011s that we did.
Correct. So they're in the total project budget, and we're assuming, well, we know we won't get reimbursement for those portions.
So could I just ask a clarifying question here? Are you saying, Brian, that because our existing gym, which we call a field house, but we'll call it a gym, is already too large to meet the MSBA standards and they won't engage in renovating it?
No, okay, so on this option, they would renovate it. And on this option, you're keeping your plus or minus athletic, you're keeping the field house. And
Yeah.
on all of the subsequent options, we're assuming the maximum size they will allow for a gym, and a portion of that is ineligible. So they would participate in, they would analyze this ad reno option, and they might decide they might not participate in some square footage based on some logic of it's above their template size, but they would allow you in this option to renovate that space and therefore
Okay.
retain it.
And in that case, they would reimburse us for a small portion of the overall space and have us pay 100% of the reno for the rest of that space.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Exactly. All of the other new construction options, you don't even have the choice to go beyond what we've carried. It's just
Right.
not allowable. Here in the ad reno, you can, it just, they will prorate the cost somehow.
Okay,
And because of those reasons, and the other real big one is they contribute $333 a square foot towards the building, towards the direct cost, the box. On just about all of our options, after you factor in which of these design contingencies would flow into the direct value, we're coming out with high 600s into $700 and all in square foot. They reimburse $333 for that. So your major cut from thinking about this as 79% of the total budget really happens in that they're only going to participate in $330 a square foot. We will not be able to build a building for $330 a square foot. The numbers we're carrying right now come out closer to 700. If all of these budget numbers need to be driven down, we could advise on how to drive down that 700 or so square foot value for new construction all in, but it's never going to become $333. So there's always going to be some portion of eligible square footage, eligible building that is not being reimbursed because it's over $333 a square foot. So those things all conspire to create an effective reimbursement rate, which is simply the estimated grant divided into the total project, which you're going to see this varying from the high 30s to the high 40s. And if that's something the committee would like sort of a more step-by-step detail on, it might be something that we could most easily cover as a little part of a presentation next week, but we could certainly talk about it more. I just wanted to pause on this option to explain how this 44% relates to your reimbursement rate of 79%. So this total project minus the grant, Revere share 205 million, You're going to start seeing this variance from 1C. 1C is the add reno or new option that came out most efficient cost-wise. So this is 8 million. The add reno is tracking into 8.2 million over new on Aracola Park. And since this option obviously would renovate the building and not displace housing, there are no added costs down at the bottom. 1B is a bulk residential eminent domain next to the existing high school. One of the assumptions that we've made on this, as opposed to the eminent domain potential over on Ambrose, is that this building would come down in this theoretical, being that they're right next to each other. This is where the schedules start looking a little bit different. And what we can talk about here as an intro is eminent domain. Eminent domain has, in the research that we've completed in the last few weeks and talking with Sleeper Associates who've given us their draft reports on the potential relocation, we've all become pretty convinced that eminent domain is really neutral through all the options except furlong. And the Housing Authority is a little different story, but in terms of the existing options that might have eminent domain and eminent domain at Wonderland, we think all of it can be done inside of the time frame that we'd still be designing the building. So there's about an 11-month time frame, and we're stretching it out on a few of these options because of the amount of houses, for example, involved with this. But 11 months from, if we have a project back here, it goes to vote, it gets funded, we would immediately then start the eminent domain process. And Lynn Stapleton gave a really good sort of detailed timeline of all these things that would happen. But in terms of eminent domain and either Wonderland or the private structures around the existing high school, they're nearly a sure thing that it could be approved, and it could be approved and would be approved within about a 7 to 11 month time frame. The things that can stretch this time frame more relate to, I would say, back and forth about the value of what's being paid and the success of getting all of these people onto similar properties of a similar value and managing sort of, in a way, all those transactions. It's a sure thing on these options. We feel that it could get done. Therefore, we're showing the time frame happening in design development. And we would basically have access to the land and be able to clear the houses in fall of 2023 if the process were to begin back here in fall 2022, based on a selection of this option this fall. So I just want to keep stressing that the option's going to have to be picked back here this fall of 2021. And then we have to run out this whole process to then have it get approved by the city, get approved by the voters for a debt override. That's when we'd actually have a real project, a real budget. That's when we could start eminent domain. So I'm going to tell you a little bit different when we get to furlong, because this eminent domain time frame stretches out a little. But all of the residential options and the Wonderland option, we do not feel inhibits our ability to start the building. We can get a shovel in the ground when we need to, and therefore it's not affecting the schedule. It is a risk to the budget because
Brian.
Yep.
This is Patrick. I had a question in regards to that, and again, I apologize if I missed it, but could you give a highlight? Not today, but could you just highlight the amount of eminent domain per location, or as we start to get closer to selecting, and as you mentioned, the timeline. Only because the more people you start dealing with, so not just on the value of the properties, but if you're dealing with 5 people or if you're dealing with 15, obviously 15 people, the chances of someone stretching it out and making it a longer process gets high, grows. If you're dealing with one person, potentially for a Wonderland site, that's going to be less interaction, less chance, or the percentages get better. So, and then of course the property values will change dramatically as you can imagine, depending on where you're looking. So I just think that's very important on the timeline of the project and the of course those incurred costs.
Got it, Patrick. And we do have that data. I think it's on, I can zoom into it in a second. I believe this option is about 85 houses. So this is a huge amount of residential eminent domain. And you'll see on the Wonderland options that this blue eminent domain bar is even a little quicker than this because of exactly what you just noted. An eminent domain on Wonderland, there's no occupancy down there. There is a parking lot business that we would have to deal with, but we think that is the biggest slam dunk. We think all of these could get approved. What would extend the time frame is debating about value, and that would also mean whatever our assumption is that we've carried in the budget for the dollar value for this eminent domain is a number that's at risk. It's a number that we have to make some assumptions of what it is right now. There might be dozens or a handful of these 85 people that ended up hanging on and get a higher settlement out of it.
It doesn't
Brian,
mean.
if you back up to the map, the eminent domain area is shaded in orange. So if you go back a slide, do you see that, Patrick? He might be on his phone. I don't know if
Yes,
he-
no, I can see it. I was just, it's tough to fully calculate the amount that comes into it. Obviously, I can definitely see the range, and I can kind of go on my own map and kind of cross-reference how many homes are in that area. But I guess if we just had a kind of a full basket of the top sites, the eminent domain timelines, and the amount of properties. And I know that this is sensitive information. We don't want to get too much of that to get out there, because it definitely, people might get too far ahead of themselves.
Mhm.
Yep.
The issue with the eminent domain, I mean, you can take control of the properties as long as you give them the 4 months to vacate. The issue, you make them a pro tanto payment, and they have the right to go to court to ask for more value. However, it doesn't mean that they can stay in the house until the court is settled. They have to leave, and they can extend it by going to court for more value, but they can't not vacate the property.
Well, not to get into too much of a debate, but I think that housing rights, obviously, and I know that this is probably being more of a governmental process, the evictions have not gotten any easier over the last 10 years. So there's no doubt that could, there's always a chance that could get delayed even further.
Well, especially now, I guess, with COVID too, where they have all these moratoriums on evictions. So
Exactly.
that's something I guess we haven't really factored in.
So Brian, could I ask briefly, what is you seem fairly confident about eminent domain rate of success and also a relatively short time frame. What is the basis of the information you got that gives you this confidence?
I think it's really the going by referencing the legal process for eminent domain and really the rights of the city in that case. And it has been done on the last school project in Revere, and it was a significantly smaller amount of houses that were taken down behind the fire station to get that access road in there. Thank you, Nick, for pointing that out to us a few weeks ago. But it's really the time frame is relatively set by the process, Joe. So we have got input from Sleeper Associates as well to sort of lay out that process, and it's really a 4-month process that we're carrying a 7-month process behind that to work out some of those payment issues that Lynn referenced.
How about actual real world experience of other towns or something like that? I know there's, as has been previously discussed, there's sort of rules of the game, but I was just wondering in the practical world, did that verify that yes, that it goes that quickly?
It did on the last Revere project. Lynn, I'm not sure if you had any other just experience that you could speak to on that.
Yes, we had one that went even faster than the process that's here in the city of Lynn, where we had but it was only a few residential properties and one commercial property. But it's all the timeline's all in accordance with Mass General Law, and I forget the chapter number, but I'll look it up here real quick and give it to you in the chat.
And Joe, you'll see I'm not trying to jump ahead, but bookmark this discussion for when we get to furlong, because furlong is an option that, because of the commercial businesses that are there and because of their nature, we're extending this time frame out significantly, because we think coming to some settlement on value or relocation would get tripped up. So the options that relate to Wonderland and the existing site are sort of both in this time frame and not pushing your construction time frame. For furlong, you'll see that it is pushing our assumption for when we could actually get a shovel in the ground.
And demo is included in which bar?
We would be basically the first act of the project would be, we would bid site work early. The site work package for the project would include the demolition. So once we got our hands on that property and once we had subcontractors bid out and a general contractor in place, we would start with site prep. And some of these schedules even have a little few month period in here for site prep when we have a whole lot of land to attend to.
And the Mass General Law chapter is 79A, if you want to take a look at that.
Yeah, I having worked in government, there's the law and then there's the politics and the practicality. So I was just interested if there's, if somebody had, took 50 houses and did it really take 4 months? That's okay. We can get into that later.
Yeah, no, I haven't found an example anywhere near this 85 number, Joe. And I think there are a lot of examples. If you're talking single digits, a dozen. I have not found any comparable example for 85.
No, and I understand, this is absolutely a best guess, and just so everybody understands that at this point in a project, these are, good estimates and best guesses, but it's very early in a project, and no one should think these things are hard and fast.
Yep, agreed. Agreed. So this, we talked about the front end of this. We would bid early for site work to get in the ground. We would allow the design to get completed. We would bid the final design for the superstructure, steel, all the finishes of the building. We believe we would be done in the spring of 2026. We have a pad on a number of these new constructions of a few months to get the whole lot of technology and FF&E into the building. One of the reasons, just going back to why tech happens out here, is we don't want to bid the tech back here a year or two before. A lot can change in these few years in terms of technology. So we do tech and furniture procurements right ahead of the move. For this option, it would be summer 2026. These are some of the options that we then are carrying: abatement and demo of the existing building, and then replacement of what's there. On all these numbers for this option, replacement of what's there is putting 2 fields where the existing building is and rehabbing Aracola Park. So that runs into here. So I do think I can check the 85 number to Patrick's question, but the estimate we have on assessed numbers, assessed property values for those 85 houses, plus some factors for where we think they would go, puts this up close to $50 million. And again, this is a piece of all these budgets that is 100% ineligible. And there's even, there would be chat in PSR as we go forward with the budget of, would even this part of the budget be a direct city cost? Would it be part of the project? Would it be borne by either way, it's borne by the city and the taxpayers, but any of these options with eminent domain and cost to obtain, one of the questions we'll be asking moving forward is, do we carry that in the project numbers as it is here, or does this become sort of a separate cost? The site cost estimate, 34.2 million for this option. Total direct costs for the building, again, the box, 211 million, translates into 101 million in markups, 60 million in soft costs. It's a 422 million dollar total project estimate. a $160 million projected grant, which is a bit less than the options you saw on the previous option on 1A that was averaging out to about 44%. So the effective reimbursement rate here is even a bit lower, 262 million potential cost to Revere, and 64 million over new on Aracola Park. So the notes that I basically put over here again related to what could be cost risk. We are doing 4 fields in this hypothetical situation. We are abating and demolishing the existing building, but we have some really good estimates for that value built in here. So we're pretty confident there. But it's really this what would be the escalation of compensation for some or all of these 85 households that hung on for more money than is adding up to 50 million. So that why this is noted here as a risk is this is really a guess based on the property value with 15% and relocation costs added into it. If we were to get bogged down in debate, the schedule might not change, but this number might change as we go through eminent domain. And we'd have to discuss in any of these options how to carry some type of contingency to deal with that. It would have to come out of something in this budget if we were doing it as part of the project.
Brian, why would we have to redo Aracola Park in this scenario?
It's something we have it in all of them. We could take it out of all of them as well. You
Okay.
don't need
All right.
to. Yep. The idea behind these were all the numbers you're seeing should be all in worst case scenario numbers.
Got it.
And so any option that maintained Aracola Park, we've assumed we're going to returf it, et cetera.
Okay.
That could be a few $1 million that comes out of the project as an option. It would probably be a couple $1 million.
Okay. And can I ask one more question on this option? Is there any way to think about the feasibility of, particularly with this option, not demolishing the existing building?
I think there could be. I think it would really come down to be how would we support parking. It could turn into a scenario of you might need some of Aracola Park for parking, considering 3 structures, and we might need to study, where can one of these fields go elsewhere. But I would think the biggest challenge would be to find parking for 3 buildings as opposed to 2. So it's definitely that. There's no reason if this option, for example, were to go forward, that the do we drop this building or not isn't studied more if it goes forward. So you would have the ability to study that further if this is one of the options that moves forward.
Okay.
Brian, Patrick again. This is something I've been meaning to ask over the last couple of meetings is, going up on parking, is that something that's feasible? I know the cost, it gets a little bit more, but where we don't have the space in a lot of the areas, and parking not being, I don't think that would be a safety concern where you can't really go so high on the building. But if you were to go up 2 levels in parking and be able to put, triple the parking by making less of a footprint, is that something that can be worked in?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Patrick. And that would be the other option to displacing a field is either do split or underground parking here, get some new parking under this building, see how we can optimize this lot. But those would be the exact type of things we would study. Just because this option is triggered right now to include demo and not include underground parking doesn't mean that couldn't be further studied going forward.
Brian, just a question. I'm looking at that map and taking that amount of properties and square footage. Has any other sites in the city been looked at that you could drop that building on with the fields accommodations and impact less housing? I mean, this is the first I've really focused in on taking that many houses without looking at other areas of the city that took that many houses. I really never really looked at the city from a bird's eye view down and say, where what would be a better location if we were going to take that many properties?
I think
That's
the only place,
Go ahead, Diane.
I think the only place, Carl, that we've seen that's not super densely populated is the housing authority. Or like Wonderland and the pieces that we're looking at, you know what I mean? Everywhere
Yeah.
else, the houses are on top of each other like they are in that diagram there.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is if we're going to drop a diagram in a densely populated area and, you know, overshadow a bunch of houses that would take out, there may be other options in the city to do that. I mean, I don't think we're looking at a non-dense situation there. We're looking at basically the way the rest of the city lays down. I just haven't really, I know like the housing authority has a lot more space in between the houses, but that section of the city right there really is the same as everywhere else in the city. I just wonder if we're looking to just do that, then why is that location better than any other location?
I think the only quick answer is that it would be at least twice as bad if we went anywhere else, because I would think we would assume that some fields come along with it. So if you take this area, and you guys tell me if that's not the case, but I don't think we'd build a building with no fields. So I think we'd be looking at an eminent domain similar to this entire area, and I can't see how it wouldn't be close to double the houses. But I understand what you're saying, Carl. There's another point about it really would probably have had to be studied already, just to be able to keep the sequence of this project going. Not to say we couldn't change the schedule, but I think if we were to just take a full site with fields, residential, eminent domain, I think we'd have to go backwards a little bit to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I just can't see having the parking accommodated with leaving that building there. I was thinking if we're going to leave that existing building and not demolish it, that would be the reason to take that footprint and start looking at other areas. They could technically involve some properties around those fields, but not necessarily that section of properties right there.
Yep. And I mean, even if this option is going to go ahead, figuring out is this the exact right perimeter? Is it, you know, that we could definitely study that further. I think a completely different site, we'd have to back up a little bit and probably rearrange the feasibility study schedule.
Brian, this is Nick Rystrom. Is there any opportunity to, quote unquote, split the amenities of the site? So, for example, let's say we're looking at this plan. Let's say instead of taking all those houses, you take the new building, you put it where Aracola Park is, and then rather than eminent domain, this, thickly settled part, you go and recreate Aracola Park somewhere else in the city that's less dense, so that you're not affecting as many residents. Is there any opportunity like that, or does everything have to kind of be in the same area?
No, I think what you just described sounds like a variation of 1C, the next option. It would be one way or the other, building out here. Right now, that option assumes knocking down the existing building and putting Aracola Park here. But there's no reason that option couldn't study, well, what if Aracola Park goes somewhere else altogether? What if this building stays? So I would think, just to, click forward just a second, that's some variation of this option. This option is build out here, however we can make it work, and drop the existing school, put Aracola Park back here. There's no reason this option couldn't investigate a similar idea to what we were just talking about over here, in that, does the building remain, or does Aracola Park go somewhere else? So let me see. I think we went through this schedule, including that, as drawn right now, this is as sort of estimated. It includes demo and it would include site work here. If that weren't the case, obviously this schedule would look a little bit different because we wouldn't be abating and doing site work. We might have a little bit of finished site work to do or phase 2 parking work, but it wouldn't be laid out like this. And it would ripple into variations of these costs as well. So just continuing forward and keep the questions coming. 1C, this is the option that other than the bring the existing building up to code, at least from a cost perspective, came out the most cost effective. It is most basically looked at: build on Aracola Park, demo the building, put Aracola Park back here, excuse me. As I noted, this could be studied further of does this building remain. Right now, just the way the numbers and schedules are rigged up, this building comes down and gets demolished. So same front end of the schedule, same early site work package to get into the ground to start building, same 30-month duration, same 2026 summer occupancy with abatement and demo, potential abatement and demo, and then Aracola Park replacement at the back end of this. What's noted on this option too is the potential for eminent domain, whether it's over here off Mountain Ave to help fields or up in here to help parking or fields, is something that we feel not only can be studied further with this option in PSR, but it has a massive runway. The key is that we don't need eminent domain to do the building. If we keep this plan on the building can be built on available land, we would have all the time in the world to study eminent domain to benefit the final parking and site work component. And just one random thing I remembered, point of information, this site, the existing high school site, was originally taken by eminent domain. Doesn't really mean anything, but I didn't know that, learned that recently when we were looking at the deed. So back when this high school was built, the determination was obviously made that there was no better place to put this, and wasn't residential, as everyone knows, but it was taken by eminent domain to build this high school.
Ryan, were there any residential properties taken, do you know, during the construction?
Didn't look like it. It just looked like what were the front and the back sort of shapes, and they looked like single lots that were all the part of that sort of operation that was there before. It didn't appear on the deed that it looked like there were houses, but I'm not sure. I think it was a payment to one single owner.
Thank you.
So the cost for this item, and again, this is one variance from 1C, is 0 here. This is the most cost efficient among the non-reno options. We're carrying no eminent domain. It can be studied further. As I just noted, 24 million site costs, 201 million cost of the box, translates into 97 million markups, 57 million soft costs, a $356 million total project price tag, and a projected MSBA grant of just shy of 159 million, which is one of the higher numbers of the effective reimbursement. Usually the options that are most cost effective end up getting you the closest you can get to your true reimbursement level. Some of these vary down from here into the high 30s, puts this at a $197 million potential cost to Revere. This is the other eminent domain scenario of take Ambrose Park, take these 2 blocks out to Revere Street, and take this block back in here, either to move somewhere in here is where we'd probably think about putting Ambrose Park back. It probably would be a good rehab of these in this scenario. But again, same option, this could go off-site. In this option, we have assumed the building stays, just to have a little contrast in the numbers and to have a few options. So either option still, if this option advanced, we could study further. If does this building really come down? Does it get saved? Just as with the eminent domain option over here, we could study whether it stays or not. But this is 3 main parcels of eminent domain. I think it's about 35 or 36 parcels as opposed to the 85 for the other, and quickly that's translating into a $26 million cost to obtain at the beginning of this screen. But to quickly look at the schedule, this is a pretty efficient schedule. Again, eminent domain, eminent domain timeframe is, you know, high likelihood of success in the timeframe we need it to be. A little bit less financial risk because it's 35 houses as opposed to 85. So if there's more debate about value, it theoretically would be about a lesser value comparatively, but we still could bid early site work in the summer of 2023. We could still get a shovel in the ground in the fall, bid the final package, and have that same summer 2026 move timeframe. Right now, this is carrying about a year and a half site work process on this site to put Ambrose Park somewhere. For right now, we assume here, and maybe as part of it to sort of interweave parking in a different way, so both of these buildings have some parking, et cetera. So there is a site work component here, but there is not a demo component of the existing building. Puts the project complete out in spring of 2028, but again, occupied new building, summer 2026. This option shakes down to a Revere cost to Revere of 224, which is 27 million over the new on Aracola Park. And the big driver between this and the other eminent domain we just looked at is, you know, 35 houses, 26 million, as opposed to 85. And I think that number was closer to 50 million. So the real big driver of this, why is it 27 million more, is in this cost to obtain category comparative to just going back. Option 1B, that's really what's driving a massive difference in these numbers is we're basically doubling, it's twice the value of property looking at this whole space as opposed to these smaller 3 blocks. This is also on the options that we plugged. The school stays open. This was really based on some high-level metrics of keeping a building of a certain size put together, but I referenced earlier that Dan and our team will put our head together and just try to have some sort of number of what it would cost to just keep that building running as something. It's just side info. We just wanted it here, and we haven't seen any option yet that kicks in replacement housing. Moving over to Wonderland Site 2A is sort of an all-in.
Brian, can I ask a quick question? In the past, we talked about some of these required Article 97 and the time it would take in there. Are they in these? It's a little hard for me to read these things. Are they in there in terms of schedule?
I forgot to put it in here. The Article 97 process would be applicable to this 1C, and it would be applicable to 1D as well. But it can fit in the same sort of explanation as the eminent domain not pushing the schedule, Joe. So I am going to add it as a bar back here. I forgot it, but it's a bar that once we know we have a project and we're funded, we would start that process for real in spring of 2022. And it's there is a high likelihood, as long as we have the right buy-in from the city and the folks that got to get this up to the State House, that all is done within a year. So that Article 97 process is attached to any of these park movers, but it would not extend our ability to bid and get a shovel in the ground.
And
I
so
appreciate you mentioning that.
And your data that you have suggests that a year is sufficient and the likelihood of success is very high. Is that correct?
We believe so, yes. I'm going to jump into Wonderland. This is right now shown as sort of we talked about having 2 options. One, to bring in almost all the field components minus the stadium to the one site. It might not end up taking up the whole site, but this is estimated at 5 fields, and it's sort of the all-in Wonderland option. You can see that we still have an eminent domain time frame back here, but I keep clicking, sorry. It's pulled back even to it's probably bare minimum of 4 + 7 months with a little bit of change on there. The other bars sort of do bleed into, we think we'd be going back and forth until the fall of 2023 to establish the value of those private residences. But the only real technicality with this site is, you know, there's a small parking operation down there, otherwise unoccupied, no residents. So we think this eminent domain timeframe, we would start right when the project passed, and we would be done with it before we would need to be done with it. So this is, we could hit the ground running in, at Wonderland in fall of 2023. And that projects out that same 30-month build, same as some of these other options, as a summer 2026 occupancy. And we're just noting here that things that can be studied further in PSR. You're not seeing a demo phase or site work phase here. We want to study further on any Wonderland option, whether the existing school is maintained or not. And we want to investigate further a pedestrian connection back to the existing site. That's not currently built into this budget. So there is, we're assuming that we would do all these fields. We're also assuming that we would rehab Aracola Park. Again, that's something that is a $1 or $2 million plug can just come out if the committee wants it to come out. We would not be demoing and abating the existing school. And really the only other risk that I'm noting here is this land value. I mean, we're marking this up to a $24-25 million eminent domain process. However, I believe to make a comparison to the movie theater, and these numbers I haven't been able to verify, but I would have, my math that led me to 24 million here would have led me to about 22 million at the movie theater. And I believe it just sold for 50. Now it sold, it wasn't eminent domain. I'm just pointing that out as the one thing that could really drive this budget is, can we get control of this site for the 24-25 million that we're thinking we can. Otherwise, this Wonderland option comes down to a bottom line of 397 million and a bottom line to Revere of 245 million, and is about 48 million over that new build on Aracola Park option. The small version of the site is extremely similar. It really is just considering that maybe a much larger portion of this site would be turned over to the city after eminent domain, and we would just put the sort of the minimum fields component at this new site. Schedule is exactly the same. It's, you know, even though it's less building, it's still same amount of building. It's less site work. It's still a 30-month duration on these options. The site work is happening in tandem with the with construction, being that we have control of the whole site, can happen over these summer periods. So same schedule here for the small option at Wonderland, summer move 2026. That's a slightly different price tag, same plug for eminent domain, and just a lot less site costs, nets down to a $226 million potential price tag to Revere, and about 29 million over the new build on Aracola Park option. Jumping into housing authority options, we have large, medium, and small. This is really where you're going to see different time frames. You might not even be able to read this. This got so sort of skinny. But in discussion with the city, this isn't really, the eminent domain timeframes, et cetera, are kind of irrelevant to this. The main question is, when could the city displace this amount of units? And I don't have the amount of units noted on here. I know we have it on some other slides. It's just not in front of me. And I forget, I think this is upwards of 340. It is on here. So the 340 displacement, which is this option, and the 227 displacement, which is the medium option, according to discussions with the city, Bob O'Brien, some other folks, to have open, ready to occupy, and people moved in public housing for these two options, they would need till the end of 2027. So the front end of the schedule is the same. We would be selecting an option this fall. We'd be running that option through public funding and a vote next summer, and we'd be starting design development and eventually bringing on a construction management team to do the estimates and do the drawing reviews that are sort of required of this process. But then we would have to wait for that housing to be open and occupiable. There is nowhere near the amount of housing capacity to relocate 227 or 340. And this also is assumed to be an entirely separate project. So this time frame includes, on the front end, establishing a real project partnership, getting a site. The site either would be a piece of Wonderland or potentially a piece of Beachmont, the Beachmont parking lot at the train station. that would all have to be approved, funded, permitted, built, folks moved in. We could then hit the ground in early 2028 and demolish what we need to demolish at the Housing Authority location, which would then kick us into our 30 months to build a new building. It puts us all the way out to a mid-year move, a New Year's move at the end of 2023, 2030, 2031, apologies. And then that standard 10 months after we do the audit. So this really is contingent upon the city being able to get, in this case, 340 new units opened up and occupied by end of 2027. The schedule is going to be the same for the medium option. It's going to be shorter for the small option. But quickly on the budget, you'll see there isn't a massive cost to obtain here. The city already owns this land, but this 6.8 million is an estimate on certain parts of compensation and relocation based on those 340 something units. And this also becomes one of the more expensive options, partially due to the amount of site work, the amount of site area that would be developed. That's a higher number than some of the other options. 424 million total price tag, an effective possible reimbursement calculation of around $157 million grant, and a local share, not including the replacement housing project, which estimated at 270K per unit is about a $92 million project. So these numbers up here on all the options, to try to be fair, we're carrying either site acquisition if it needs to be eminent domain or purchase, and we're carrying the cost of relocation. For these housing options, we have not built in the cost to actually build that other structure. And that's something that definitely could get funding from various other sources. But if you really want to do an all into the city, you would really have to add this blue line 267 to the replacement costs for housing.
Brian, with that timeline, can we go back to the timeline for a minute? Was the consideration there only that these needed units would be established through private corporations building, and city requiring them to include a certain number of affordable housing, or did the city consider, for example, purchasing the Wonderland site and building public housing there?
That's what I've mostly heard, Superintendent Kelly, is using a piece of Wonderland. I'm going to back up to the Wonderland map. Whoa, too many clicks. This is a prime option for replacement housing units in some sort of developer, city and developer partnership to develop those replacement units, either over here. The other location I've heard them talk about is the MBTA parking lot at Beachmont Station. Potentially putting either of these would have to be much more vertical than the existing housing authority site, but both of them could sustain something of this size being built there. So what I've heard talked about would be some type of public-private partnership for dedicated housing, not necessarily more what's happening at Suffolk Downs, which is some percentage are affordable housing, more a actual public housing project with a developer to build that space and get it occupied in the time that that we would need it to then hit the ground running.
And that they felt that would take 7 years?
Yes, end of 2027 is what I was told what we should assume for the 340 or the 227. To jump forward, this would be medium getting smaller and smaller. Same schedule though. The smallest option of taking the absolute lowest amount of houses on the site, which more looks like that, only needs 152 units to be displaced. They believe that that can happen by end of 2025. And my knowledge of why they believe that is they think 152 is one project, and the other two numbers going up to the 340 or whatever it is are two projects. And they are not, I was not told those projects could potentially happen simultaneous to each other. The assumption is that somewhere along this large bar, there are potentially 2 projects to displace the 227 or the 340.
Okay, thank you.
So just quickly to go through the medium option, same schedule, unfortunately, same risks. The numbers shake out a little bit differently. This one comes down to $399 million, $247 million Revere share, and about 50 over the new build at Aracola. And again, the smallest version of our take as few houses as possible. The only difference here is other than less site area to develop, so that's pushing the budget as well. But the city believes they could displace 152 units by the end of 2025. So any of these options this blue bar would have to be something. If this is picked as an option back here in PSR, we're going to have to really know the impact of this. So to me, if any of these housing options do make it on for further study, we need to really sit down with the city to start making this a little more than just a theoretical plan. Because if we do select it this fall, we are married to it. We will bring that through funding. We'll bring it through a public vote. And if anything fails in there, we don't get to default to another option. We have to go back and repeat what we've already done. So that's sort of the option all of us want to avoid. So if we are studying any of these housing options in the PSR, we're going to need to work with the city to make this a real plan. So the small site, as I noted, less site costs, $369 million total. Price tag 217 to Revere, 20 million over the new build at Aracola Park.
Brian, could you go back to that budget one more time? So for
Yep.
all three of the housing authority, that bottom that last number, is that is that the development cost to the city to build the new housing or something else?
Yes, that's exactly what that is. Yep.
Okay. And the reason that the effective reimbursement rate on these and the other two, I think, were even lower, given that there's less acquisition cost, what's pushing down that number? If that made sense.
Yep. So I think as the option gets smaller, and I'm just looking at the numbers, as the option gets smaller and has less site work, your effective reimbursement rate's going to go up. Part of that is there's a site cap, is they cap the site costs in every one of these options. We will have more site costs than what they cap. So it basically is sites with more site costs are going to drive this percentage being a little bit different. The less site work we're doing, the less site work there is over the cap. So technically your reimbursement goes a longer way.
Okay.
So jumping into Furlong before we hit some of the just all projects on one page summary, we're carrying 4 fields at Furlong. We don't know exactly the extent of eminent domain, other than it would definitely be on these commercial properties and come out to Revere Beach Parkway. Right now, what's calculated in the eminent domain numbers leaves the trailer park area. However, that we could treat that sort of interchangeable. I think the decision for now was we didn't want to necessarily carry eminent domain of this entire block. We think there's some way of leaving something if we need to, and that was really just presented to you in that way as a cost control items. There's a number of items on this site that are sort of cost premiums, one of which is in the spreadsheet, but based on initial indications of contaminated soil down here, we think this is the only site that we would basically need to strip 3 feet of soil off everything that was left here and build it back up. That's a very large premium of, I think it was around 15 or $20 million that's sort of baked into this. It also has the premium of eminent domain and eminent domain of heavy commercial. So we got to the point where the number was going to be even worse than it is if we did eminent domain everywhere. So at least in the numbers you're seeing right now, this area up here at the trailer park is not counted as part of the eminent domain. You'll see that this one, as I was noting earlier, does push the time frame for new building construction. That really is because of the oil and gas businesses that are there. We would ultimately have the right to displace them. However, the coming to an agreement on where they could be displaced to, or what it was worth, since they're on their businesses, would take a good deal of time. We also think, based on what these businesses are, there's even if this eminent domain, gets trimmed up a little bit and can finish by when we're out to bid the job, there's probably a real site prep phase, both in terms of that 3-foot strip and fill that I talked about, and getting these gas businesses and their underground stuff off the site. They're, a little different than knocking down a house, taking out those buildings. So this option pushes the move out to summer 2027. And that's being driven both by eminent domain coming to agreements with those businesses we think will get tied up in court. And ultimately, we think it can be successful, but it might be successful with a pretty big price tag to put them in a new spot where they can do business and continue their operations. So this is a financial risk. It's a schedule risk as well. And regardless, I think with this site, there probably is, we wouldn't hit the ground running, as I've been saying with construction. We'd have to do some level of site prep. So the furlong option, the eminent domain I described without the trailer park is around 27 million. The site costs are 45. A primary driver of that is that environmental, the geo-environmental concern about having to strip this site and rebuild it. It drives a price tag of 422, $154 million projected MSBA grant, 268 to Revere, and it ends up one of the highest options we're looking at 70 million over option 1C. Again, driven by a lot of factors, but traffic signalization being one of them. I think this is the only site we plugged with a few $100,000 for some signals. So this page, thank you for bearing with me, by the way. This page lays out all of these options by sort of code, by letter here, and just gives you a comparative. When are you in the building? That's what this little house shows. Again, on these ad renos, phased occupied area. Some folks would be moved into a new area probably a year and a half, 2 years into it. And then there'd be 1 or 2 other waves of bringing people into the new area. Most of these options on the existing site and Wonderland calc out to a summer 2026 move. And we have that really long, unfortunate time frame for replacement housing for the large option. And actually, this is labeled incorrectly. This is for 3A and 3B, and this is just for 3C. I'll correct that on the record version. So this long one is 3A, 3B. This slightly shorter one for the small housing authority, less displacement. And again, it could be that I didn't mention this before. So keep in mind the key to that replacement housing might be 2 projects. This 3C, this small option for this time, this option here at the housing authority gives us enough land to build the building and start our construction. The plan the city could choose to pursue is, during this time frame, while we're building the building, work towards a second housing project that displaces more people, that allows this school to grow down the road into the medium or the large option. So I wanted to point that out as sort of a technicality on the small option. Has some schedule effectiveness to it, because we don't have to wait for all those both projects to happen. We could get going, and if the plan is set up right, it could expand in the future. Now, that wouldn't be an MSBA project. It would end up being just a project the city had to take on their own. Keep in mind, you're above the site caps. You're not going to get reimbursed for those added fields anyway. So it could be the grand plan of the city to do the minimum, take advantage of us being able to get in the ground in 2026 for the high school project to get that going, lead it towards a mid-year move in 2028, 2029, and potentially have the option to expand this out into the medium or large option with more and more fields as those other housing projects came online. So really quickly, this is a spreadsheet that got emailed around. Linda sent it to you all. This is where all the detail that I've been showing you is driven by. We're not going to go through it one by one. If anybody has any specific questions on what makes up these line items, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We can let you know. And the thing I just wanted to stress here is this is is not a budget yet. As you can see, there's a lot of assumptions baked into this. We're not doing direct estimates of an actual site design and actual building design. We're comparing everything as apples to apples as we can. This is a, sorry,
Can I
Joe,
ask
go ahead.
a general question? You probably already said this and I've probably already forgotten. The numbers that you used for eminent domain values, what was the basis of those numbers?
City assessed value plus 15% plus plugs for relocation costs.
So those numbers, so under the law, what's the value you have to pay the owner?
They're really, that's the part of it that becomes a debate. So the process would be that actual appraisers get called in and do real appraisals of all the sites, and whether it's a business or a home, those would become our budget numbers.
So that would be more a market value as opposed to an assessed value.
Yes, ultimately that would be an assessed value, and that's the 15% arguably might not be enough to mark up the assessed value, but being that we were adding in some relocation costs to the tune of a few million, at least for now, we thought it was a good plug. But you're right, Joe. Any of these options with eminent domain, part of that 4-month process, the initial 4 months followed by, 7 months, the initial 4 months would be appraisers actually putting real numbers on this. Some folks might accept it, might move on. Other folks might then take the option of going to court to say it's worth more than that. And
I was just after the assumption, given the real estate market we're currently in, and that's all non-reimbursable, right?
Correct. All 100%
Okay.
non-reimbursable. Yep.
Thank you.
So this sheet just lays out the options. It keeps the base repair option, since that's just its own animal by itself. And again, this is only talking about costs. It doesn't mean that this should be how you rank them necessarily, but this is about costs, so we put it in order of costs. The 1C ends up the most cost advantageous in the high school cost to Revere, and also in the total project costs. The ad rental on the existing site comes in just behind that, about 8.2 million above it. The small housing authority is next, about 20 million over that. And then we get into some of these options that, 27, 29, 48, you can see how they rank comparative back to this 1C. So if anybody, we'll stop for a second for questions. I know we've been going for a little bit. The only other thing we just want to talk about is scoring, but I'll pause if anyone has any detailed questions on any of these options or timeframes. Hearing none. The last item we wanted to cover here, what's on the screen is basically just the Excel spreadsheet, sort of the master spreadsheet I'm going to use. Ultimately, everything you see here that's a 0, we would like your opinion on 1 through 4. You're welcome to use decimals if you'd like to. There's no rule against it, but make it between 1 and 4. No 0s, no 5s. So however you folks want to get this done in the next week, I welcome you to do it. I know it's Father's Day weekend. I'm sorry to be giving you homework over Father's Day weekend, but anyway, you can feed this back to me, whether it's fill it out in Excel and email it, or mark it up on a paper copy and scan it. If you can't scan it, let me know. I'll come pick it up. I would love to be able to, before next Thursday's meeting, input everyone's scores, because what I'd like to do is get your scores, however you mark them up. I'll input them into the spreadsheet, and then I want to email you each a tab. You can see your names on all these tabs here. I want to email you a tab to make sure I got it right. And then I'd prefer not to sanity check this completely live next week. So it's fine if folks don't get to it till next Tuesday, but if we have to go through 12 or 13 people and get a score for every one of these, that's going to be a longer meeting than this one. So if you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. However you can mark this up. Again, even if you just want to mark it up on paper, and then I can come find you, I'll send you back a confirming version. Our goal next week is to have this all scored out and to then rank them in order of score. So again, you saw that cost spreadsheet in order of cost. This includes costs and other items. We'll rank them in the order they fall out. And then there'll be a motion to draw a line of where's the line here? Is it after the first 3, the first 4, whatever it is, of there's the line. Let's study those moving forward. So that's the goal of next meeting. The homework is to get your opinions into this sheet. And if there are no questions, I think I've taken up enough of all of your time.
Brian, I just want to clarify, because you said for next Tuesday, I think you meant next Thursday. Is
Thursday.
that right?
Sorry, yes, apologies.
That's okay. And then just in an attempt to save you some time, is there any way to get the spreadsheet with where we each have an individual tab into like a Google Doc that we could fill out ourselves? And
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a good idea. I'll talk to some folks. John Perella, I might talk to you about that because you seem like you're a master at that. So apologies.
he's the Google master.
So I'll get that set up. I'm going to sanity check that this is that I have everything in here right again, and then we'll send out an email instruction on where to jump into this. Because if you can do it in Excel, that would absolutely be easiest. Just go to your tab, put it in there. Ultimately, the summary sheet is all that matters. There's no need, unless the committee wants to go through individual folks' scores. Totally up to you. We'll just have to adjust it. If somehow we don't get scores from someone, I have it rigged up to we might drop it to 12. It's averaging off 12 as opposed to 13. So I might have to edit it at the very end if we only get, say, 12 votes, if someone doesn't get their votes in. I think that was it for me.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, maybe just follow up if there's any public comment first.
Sure. I don't see any members of the public here. I could be wrong.
No, I recognize all the names, so I don't think we have anybody. So if that's the case, then if there is no other business, I would say a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Someone needs to make the motion first.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So
All right.
motion by Rich Viscay and second by Carl Svensson.
Yes, thank you. All right, and then going down the line for roll call, Mike Picardi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Swenson,
Yes.
Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
and Rick Weisberg,
Yes.
and Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and last but not least, Patrick Keith.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good luck with the homework.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.